Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we are going to talk about a few things here. Obviously, we've kind of hit that weird lull in the offseason where it's kind of too late to be talking about the draft still, too early to be talking about camp and, kind of the progress that this team has made towards next season. So we're manufacturing content now. We're in that. That's where we are here as of May 24th, and we're gonna first and foremost. Aaron Rodgers decided to do us a solid and kind of hand us a really easy and polarizing piece of information in that he doesn't want to play for Green Bay anymore, and so we're going to do our best to dramatize that and have some fun with that a little bit because, I mean, as Vikings fans here, to be objective about it, Aaron Rodgers' impact in the NFC North is significant. If he moves at all, it impacts not just to the Packers but the other three teams as well. So there is that, and yes, there will be some gloating and probably some jokes and all that as well. So that's what we'll spend part of the show here with. And the other thing is I want to see kind of where everyone else sees the Minnesota Vikings, right? And unfortunately, the best way to identify that is to pull from a couple sources and see where they have the Vikings ranked in the power rankings. So Drew and I will digest that information, break it down, have a little fun with that. It should be an interesting discussion. But that's our plan for today here. So let's jump right into it here with Aaron Rodgers specifically, since this has been going on for a little bit here, and Drew and I just have not taken the moment to actually talk about it. Obviously, this is an ongoing story and kind of something where you can't really even trust the developments, right? It seems Aaron Rodgers does not want to be in Green Bay, although he has not actively said this out loud. I don't believe his agent has actually even said that out.
It's all reports. Actually, the reports. I mean, this whole thing. Let's actually remember this. It started from Paul Allen when he brought it up on K-Fan, and every single listener was like, I mean, you don't know anything. You're not an insider.
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel guy immediately was like, nope, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
This is wrong. Right.
Right. And then it was one of those where Schefter and Rappaport were like, oh, they have the sources, right, to check in on something like this. And that's kind of what happens, right, when someone that's maybe not trusted as a quote-unquote insider or someone that maybe has a smaller following reports something big. Then the big guys go in and check in on it and verify it themselves, and they found it to be true. And so then it blew up, and PA is sitting there like, I mean, I'm always right, but it's just so fun because then you get to see Packers fans starting to maybe get a little bit of a hint of not having elite quarterback play finally, and just kind of trying to come to grasp with it.
That is so nice, by the way.
That
small whiff of it, like
my entire life. Both of our entire lives. It's been the Packers have had.
I'm almost 30 years old, by the way. So just to
right. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So it's so fun to see that, but also we should discuss really. I mean, I kind of want to get into how much of an impact this makes on the NFC North, and then the ultimate fun question I had for you is, if for sure, obviously the situation now is Rodgers might be gone anyway, but what would you give up to get Rodgers out of the division? If there's a trade in the works, let's say, I think there's this idea that Spielman's like, hey, I might chip in to get rid of Rodgers, right? There's a trade going on with Denver and Green Bay.
Help facilitate it by chipping in a third or a fourth.
If Spielman could get a pick, whatever, to get Rodgers out, what would that be?
So this is fun because this adds, first of all, if that's something you can do, I'm not really sure. I believe there's probably
a rule about that.
But the NFL would probably reject it, but just for the sake of the fun of it, right? I'm going to answer the question anyways, because it begs the question of value in a way that we haven't been able to kind of monetize that value, right? We can't objectively point to a figure that says this is how much you should do in order to facilitate that trade. The best thing you can do here is evaluate the worth of Aaron Rodgers relative to the rest of the NFC North and how much he negatively impacts your chances of proceeding into the playoffs. I think it's an absolute lock that he is the biggest stone in everyone's path in the NFC North toward not just winning the division, but also having, a potential, bye in the first round of the NFL postseason, which are really the goal of the regular season,
MVP. Right? He's the reigning MVP.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't get much more. I mean, he's the most valuable player, and the Green Bay Packers have been the most formidable opponent in NFC North, far and away, the toughest team to beat year in, year out because of that guy.
But it's not just that he's the MVP, though. It's like you take him off of that team also, and that team falls apart.
Right.
Like completely. They go from a 12, 13-ish win team,
probably 5,
maybe
6
a little
wins.
generously. They probably dropped down to 4 or 5. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 4.
Yeah.
Maybe 3. Maybe 3.
Packers roster is not terrible, but I mean, you imagine it without the best, not the best quarterback, a top 3 quarterback in the league. And then you sub in, is it Boyle, who is number 2 right now, or maybe it would be Jordan Love if they actually want to start him.
It'd have to be, yeah.
And Jordan Love, by all accounts, has a lot to
work on,
have developed, in his game. So I mean, it changes everything. And and as Vikings fans, we know how much a not established quarterback can hurt or hinder a team.
So the last thing we discussed here on the show was the schedule, right? And Drew and I, we ended up going 1-1 against Green Bay. A lot
of that's uncertainty. I mean, if it's Rodgers there, I might just go 0-2 against them, but vice versa, 2-0. I'm taking the Vikings both games.
Okay, exactly. So that was the point that I was going to make. Then is that if we can add 2 victories over a division opponent, how valuable is that? Because I really do believe, like when it comes to the Vikings,
and it wouldn't just
slightly
be this year
above
either.
average team.
It wouldn't just be this year. I mean, Rodgers has said he wants to play, 3, 4, 5 years after this. So like, this could be getting Rodgers out of the division now. Could be, it could be like 5 to 7 wins over the next few years that you're adding onto your total.
And it makes it a cakewalk. If Justin Fields busts, it's a cakewalk to win the NFC North.
That's another issue with the draft, right? Like it's something.
Let's try to get rid of Aaron Rodgers for now. We'll focus.
Right. Well, it was like draft night. It's like, well, Rodgers, if he's gone, and this is all true, Vikings already won the draft, or at least they've already got an A grade for me. And then Bears got Fields, and I was like, maybe
their chances the most of winning the division by Aaron Rodgers simply leaving.
That's the most important move that was made. I mean, for the Vikings, if it happens. Obviously, nothing's happened yet, but
so to say that, I guess we still haven't been able to put like an actual value on this, but like to say that getting him out of the division is worth a lot would be, to put it, kindly. Like it's an extremely significant move if Aaron Rodgers is gone from the NFC North. All of a sudden you vault yourself from probably being a 8 or 9 win team that finishes probably second, is fighting for a wild card spot, into the position of being a 10, 11, 12 win team that wins the NFC
probably
North,
the division favorite game. Right. Yeah, you're probably the division favorite at that point, especially with Fields being still a rookie.
And then the point that you made about the future, it makes it basically just, it's a multiplier, right? I don't know how good I think the Vikings will probably end up being better in the next 2 or 3 years than they are this year, hopefully, assuming they are rebuilding or a little bit here and there, right? So generously, I think it's probably worth a 3rd round pick.
I was going to say 2nd round pick. I mean,
2nd round, you go as high as 2nd?
Yeah, I was, because I mean, we're talking about potentially right now. We might be exaggerating a bit, and then the Vikings did beat Rodgers last year.
Well, think about what a 2nd round pick typically is. Like, think about the roster value of a 2nd round pick.
Right. I mean, you're getting. I think for the fair expectation for a 2nd rounder is probably
Brian O'Neill, quality
starter, like in the NFL at some point. Like maybe not. I think O'Neill's even, that's on the high end of the expectation for a 2nd round pick.
I'm fine with that too.
And a lot of guys flame out in the 2nd round, but a lot of guys, put together long careers and are respectable starters. So I think like, a 5-6 year starter in the NFL is probably the fair expectation for a 2nd round pick. And would you trade that to get Rodgers out of the division right now? Absolutely. I mean,
especially because Rodgers is a known thing. There's no variables, right? Like we know he's a problem. We don't necessarily know that 2nd round pick is going to help the Vikings.
Right. That's the other thing too. Yeah.
We can use math and be like, oh, yeah, it's a 49% chance of adding a player of optimal value to your team in a position of need.
That's a really good voice. Like, that's a really good voice for like a computer stats nerd.
Yeah.
Right there.
But anyways, it's a lot. And I guess there's been no thing like to catch everyone up to speed. Like since this dropped on draft night, it's only been built up more. Like we've added trade partners. For example, George Payton in Denver is apparently calling every day, which we love that from him.
Yeah.
You've also got more, like San Francisco's been thrown on the table.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's interesting is Denver didn't get a quarterback in the 1st round of the draft, which was telling me like, okay, they got to be going after some sort of plan, right? I mean, so there's trade partners out there, and the interesting thing too is it's funny watching, like, I follow a group of Packers, analysts, fans, whatever, on Twitter, and it's watching them trying to rationalize things, and then it just kind of seems like the more this goes on and the longer the Rodgers is on the roster, they're very much convincing themselves like, okay, this was all just smoke and mirrors, there was nothing to it,
right?
But it seems
Rodgers still
like
hasn't said anything,
right? Nothing has been said at
happened
all from either side. So that's why it's such a wild card right now, and so that's why I thought of the question, like, what would you give up to kind of get this behind us, get Rodgers out of there, and have it be done? So that's why we're talking about the picks,
right?
Third round pick, second round pick, whatever.
Right. Okay. So we've established probably in that range. The final question here to round this out: does it happen? Like, is this a pipe dream? Because here's the thing. Here's the thing about Aaron Rodgers. Like, generally speaking, I would say, yeah, it's probably a blowover. They'll pay him more money. But Aaron Rodgers is a dick, right? Like, he's stubborn. And he has apparently said he's out.
He's told his teammates he's out. I saw a report this afternoon that he's been trying to talk to other star players who want out to get to find one team to go to and, become sort of a super team like you hear about in the NBA all the time. Right. Like, he's been working with or talking to other players that want out of their teams. I don't know if you saw the whole Julio Jones stuff today, but that was awesome. I don't know. So I don't know if Shannon Sharp.
I think he broke some rules there. I think he did.
I don't know what happened, but now the next thing I want is for Pat McAfee to do that to Rodgers, because those two are buds. Right. On McAfee's show, get on a call, and I don't think McAfee would do something like that. But it's just, that's like, I want to know, because we've been saying for a couple of years now, this whole, I feel like we've almost been fabricating it, and we've kind of been poking fun more so than anything at Packer Nation, where Rodgers isn't happy because you're not investing resources and all this stuff. And it was more of a joke for the most part. And then suddenly we hear all these reports from people that know things, Rappaport, Schefter, they're saying all this stuff, and it's not like Rodgers is refuting it either.
That's his
team,
point
his
here.
Agent, his representatives are not refuting anything either.
The silence is guilty.
You'd think, if he's a guy that if he either doesn't care about his reputation or care what people are thinking at the moment, or he's not, he doesn't want to lie, and the truth is there, and he's just like, that's what it is. So
I think it's one of those things where it's like clarifying it actually makes, like, it weakens your position, because there's so much information out there that it's giving him leverage.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that the Jeopardy.
Well, the leverage is that he's the MVP, and the leverage is that you have to run with Jordan Love.
Hey, he's got Jeopardy too. Like, he can retire. He can.
That would be hilarious, by the way.
It would be awesome. Oh yeah. But like, these things are actual results that could happen. So right? Like, this is like
best case scenario, I think. For the best case scenario, as much as I love watching Aaron Rodgers play, I think best case scenario is that this is true, that he would just retire to go to Jeopardy, and he's out of the league. No have to worry about him again.
Ever.
Yeah. Don't have to worry about him again. And then Packers fans have to come to the realization that their quarterback, literally the reigning MVP, coming off an MVP season, just quit because he didn't want to play for your organization.
Yeah.
That would be fun. That'd be fun to watch Green Bay, burn to the ground, and because they're very much due for that, as we know.
They deserve a bad quarterback era. They need
for 50 years.
They deserve 50, but like, they need at least 5. Like, we need to bring their level of, like, their ego down from like here to like.
Because to be fair, they had to deal with like Hundley and
poor babies.
2017 with Rodgers out. Like, they get a little bit of it, but that you still have the real, like, you're still realizing that you get him back next year, but then when there's no answer,
to convince yourself that Tarvaris Jackson is a franchise quarterback for multiple years in
Christian
a row.
Ponder,
you don't get to talk.
Matt Castle, Josh Freeman. Yeah. Remember the Josh Freeman game?
Yeah. Oh my God,
I was
excited about Josh Freeman. I was excited about Donovan. I was excited about all these guys at one point.
Gus Frerotte.
Not him. I wasn't excited about that. All right, let's talk about where the Vikings stand now. As it pertains to the rest of the entire league, right? Obviously, we're talking here about, where the Vikings stand in the NFC North, and how Aaron Rodgers could change that by moving to a different team. But relative to the entire NFL right now, the Vikings are an interesting team, right? Couple of different reasons here for that is, you've got a stable quarterback, You've also got some rookies coming in, and you've got players coming off of COVID leave. Michael Pierce specifically. You've got a couple free agents to see how much talent is left in them, and Patrick Peterson. I mean, there's a lot of talent on this roster. It makes you a polarizing team. It makes you kind of like Drew was saying last week, a volatile team that you could be a 10-12 win team, or maybe you could be a 5-7 win team. As it stands today, we have a lot of questions that we're going to need answered in the coming months here before most people can get over that 10-win, double-digit win season hump. As it stands today, I've collected 3 sources here that I consider to be, guys that know their stuff, or networks that know their stuff. ESPN, Peter King at NBC, and then Bleacher Report, which is like their, I think they have a bunch of different writers that put their, ratings together here. And we're going to look at where the Vikings stand in the power rankings, what they think, what the people, and then we're going to try to correct it. That's what we're going to do here today. So the Vikings, there's kind of an interesting range here, and that's why I wanted to have this discussion, because ESPN was the first one I looked at. They have the Vikings.
I remember this. They're a little higher than I think most think.
They're sitting at 13, right? And this was done on May 18th, so this is relatively recent. I looked at that and I was like, you know what, might be a little bit high, but okay, fine. Then I went to NBC. Peter King specifically did these rankings. He set the Vikings at number 24. And I was like, I don't know. Like that seems a little bit low. Like I think we're better than that. And then I went to Bleacher Report, which I know that they have a bunch of writers put their scores together, and they take the mean of that number, and that's the number that they use. They have the Vikings at 23. And so 2 sources are leaning heavy on the opposite end, drafting top 10 next year, whereas ESPN, the worldwide leader, whatever, they have the Vikings top 15. In my brain, they're somewhere in between. What are your kind of your initial thoughts hearing that?
I agree with you that I think they're in between, but at the same time, I see a lot of boomer bust nature with this team, which is why I think you can justify both of those positions. And frankly, I think there is an argument to be made for something higher than 13. But also I think there's the argument to be made for something 23 to 26, And so I think, and I talked about this last show before that, there's no depth on this roster to me. And so I think, starting depth chart, starting positions, starting players, there's star power everywhere. You got a top 10 quarterback. You have a really good running game. Last year, super efficient, and then 2 stud receivers. You have offensive line that has a lot of potential. You have some serious young players to build on. O'Neal's still really good. Now you have a left tackle that you can kind of build around. Defensively, you have 3 to 4 star players, and they're all at every level of the defense. I mean, that to me right there screams playoff team, screams potential contender. But after that, I mean, behind those guys is where it gets interesting. And the injury thing last year, I think it was huge. And so that's where I see the problem. And that's why I think there's big boomer bust potential with this team. And so that's why I'm kind of safely predicting 8 wins, but I really don't think it's going to be 8. I think it's going to be 10 to 11 or like 6 to 7 or 5, it's going to rely heavily on how healthy this team can be.
So that's the biggest thing, is that when you're predicting right now, as opposed to like on the fly week by week, like you don't have all the information right now. Like so much can happen between week 1 and week 2.
Yeah. I mean, I see this on the surface, including depth, including the starting players. I see like just below average team. Right. High teens in the rankings.
The Vikings are essentially a swing team. If something goes really right, you're looking at double-digit potential, probably a playoff team, maybe a home field playoff team. If you get a bad injury, which there's about 7 of them really, like because of that depth that you're talking about. If you lose Kirk Cousins, which knock on wood, it never happened.
To clarify, every single team needs injury luck, right? It's not like, but I think it's way more impactful for the Vikings and their current roster makeup than it is for other teams.
If you lose Eric Kendricks this year, it's a real problem. If you lose Harrison Smith this year, it's a real problem. So certain things here, it's not just the quarterback for the Vikings. You're right. So, if the Vikings have a full bill of health, they could very easily, you're right, they could be a 10, 12, 13 win team, and you might be even talking about them beating some other teams down the line that did not quite have that same level of injury luck, right? So all facts considered here now, 13 to 24 is the range that we're dealing with here today. I want to go through a couple of teams. I want to go through about 10 teams here that are ranked at the low end of Bleacher Report's spectrum. And we're going to play the game of, can you confidently say the Vikings are better than this team on paper? So confident, not confident. And that's kind of how we're going to try to, work our way down from 30 where the Vikings stand. So number 32 on, and this is an easy one, I think, on Bleacher Report is the Houston Texans. I think we can confidently say the Vikings are better than them.
Yeah. Houston, Detroit, we can.
Yep. Detroit was the next one. The New York Jets.
Yeah.
Okay, stop me when you hear a name that you're not as confident in. Jacksonville, Philadelphia, Cincinnati. We had some discussion last week. So
I think just because Burrow's still kind of a rookie, I mean, in the sense that he hasn't played a whole season.
I think we can say it. Okay. Yeah. Carolina, another one. The Las Vegas. I don't know about that one. That one's a little bit.
See, I think that's where it starts to get interesting.
And that would be, they have Vegas ranked at number 25. The next one on the list is Atlanta. I'm pretty confident there.
I think
the Vikings themselves. The New York Giants. I think the Vikings are better than the Giants. The Denver Broncos. That's where it starts to get interesting. So we're saying it starts to get interesting in that 20 to 23 range.
But I bet the next 10 to 15 teams is probably be the same sort of reaction where it's like,
Chicago, New Orleans, New England. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, of course, no Drew Brees there. Cam Newton again. Dallas. Dak returning from injury. Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, there's a case to be made for the Vikings.
So it's really fishy right in that range. But I think those first probably 6 to 8 teams that you mentioned, I think the Vikings are better than that. So I think this range is very accurate, honestly, now that I think more about this. I mean, there's probably 6 to 8 teams where I think the Vikings are substantially better, even if they do get a slew of injuries like they did last year. They're still going to beat those teams, and I feel very confident about that. Then you get into that middle range, the Dallas. I'd put Washington in there. You talk about the Chargers, Raiders, Colts in there. Cardinals, yes. I mean, that's where the range, I think it's going to be, the spreads on those games per se should be very little, if any, in those games. So, but I think if you're putting them at 13, that means, I just think it means one thing, and that's the team is relatively healthy and their star players are playing, and you're not giving inexperienced or incapable players a bunch of snaps.
So then the question becomes, now we've established we've established that essentially neither of us are going to go below 20 for the Vikings right now. Is essentially what we're saying.
More or less, yeah.
More or less. Let's see how high we can get here. So using ESPN's rankings now. So a little bit different, where they have the Vikings at 13. Is there an argument to leapfrog starting with the Colts? I think maybe, but probably not. Maybe, but probably not. Arizona?
No.
Tennessee?
I kind of the Arizona offense, I think, is just too much. I think
San Francisco,
destroy the Vikings.
No. Seattle, no. Cleveland, no. So I think that about the highest that you can go right now, knowing what we do, expectations that we have, bars set, is probably 12. So 12 to 24. That's where the Vikings are going to find themselves this year. And in theory, injury luck pushes you one way or the other. So if you are, the 12th, if you are the 24th best team in the NFL, which I don't think the Vikings are, and you lose Kirk Cousins all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, because I think last year was pretty darn close to as bad as they could have had injury-wise.
I think so.
I mean,
I agree.
I mean, that's, obviously
without
things
losing your
can
quarterback.
Surprise you without losing your quarterback, and they were probably in that 20th range. I mean, they picked 14th in the draft, or that was their pick. So,
and we're competing
right in that range.
Actually.
Yeah, they're right in that range. So, I think if you get a little bit more health, your Daniel Hunter plays, Anthony Barr plays the whole year, Eric Kendricks plays the whole year. I think that changes things, and cumulatively, I think you get a win or two out of that. And so I think that's significant, and that can swing your record quite a bit. You go from, for example, what was last year? They're 7-9. All of a sudden, you're 9-7. You're in the playoffs, and you're competing against the Saints for a win, which they happened to win that exact game the year before. So that type of thing. Suddenly I think that moves them up a few spots. Again, I mean, I know that's the case with every team. You have an injury to one particular player. If it's the wrong player, that can really damage a team. But I think the Vikings in particular have more players that can severely damage the team if they are hurt, if that makes sense. Because I think there's no pass rush depth. Neil Hunter is a stud there. Linebacker depth is not great and not trustworthy after those first two studs. Same in the secondary. And then, of course, at quarterback, we have question marks there. So, and then at receiver as well. I mean, you have two stud playmakers. Who's your third guy? Is the rookie going to step up and be a solid third option and potentially a number two if there's an injury? I mean, there's so many questions there that I think the Vikings and their injury luck swings things quite a bit more than any other team.
Okay, so we're going to round this thing out here with a ridiculous question that doesn't have a right answer. But it's a fun
I like those questions.
Right, I do too. As far as one player that can swing it one way or the other, right? So let's play with the number a little bit. Let's say the Vikings are the 16th best team in the NFL. That puts you somewhere in between where we think they're going to be. Which one player can elevate the Vikings the furthest by having a tremendous season, by proving people wrong, by staying completely healthy? Which one player has the most invested in the Vikings' success outside of Kirk Cousins? You can't.
Yeah, I was going to say, okay, just as a club.
The quarterback is the quarterback, but which one player's improvement or whatever, or just to bring offer of stability, maybe gives the Vikings the most chance.
So I like this because there's a couple possibilities. It's basically whoever is the opposite pass rusher of Danielle Hunter. The guy, I mean, if there's a viable second pass rusher that can, whether that's Wanham, whether that's Weatherly, I don't care who it is, somebody step up and be a threat that is not an automatic double team Hunter. That's what I would say.
Okay. So that's interesting. I think that, there's a couple ways that I want that you could go here. I think a really easy one is just picking Christian Darrisaw and just being like, okay, if this guy's a Pro Bowler and all pro, all of a sudden the Vikings will be able to pass, open it up a lot more downfield with Justin Jefferson. So you could go that route. I'm going to go a little different because I think that if Patrick Peterson is comeback player of the year, a guy that can literally shut down a wide receiver, take him off the field, be the guy that he was in Arizona for so many years, right? A traveling corner that literally went everywhere, interior, exterior, press off, whatever. If he can be that guy, if you can get that for a full 16 games, hell, if you can get that for 14 games, I think the Vikings become.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't disagree with that.
Think about taking Devontae Adams for 2 games, and let's pretend Aaron Rodgers is there because I think he's going to be, right? Take Devontae Adams from a 116-2 guy with 14 catches down to like a 440 and maybe a touchdown line. It's a game changer. All of a sudden, you could really win the division.
Especially against Green Bay, then you're forcing Equinemius St. Brown to be the second option or whatever, right. or Alan Lazard or whoever else is there. So that's a good one. I mean, I think those that's basically we're hitting on positions, right? Because cornerback and pass rush. I mean, that's if one of those two things is terrible, like the Vikings were at pass rush last year, and in some cases at cornerback, then you get a defense that's bad. So
right. All right. Well, I believe that rounds out our thoughts here. Do you have any final thoughts about the Vikings as it pertains to where they stand amongst their competitors in the league right now?
I don't. I think we have a lot more to learn. And again, I do think injury luck's going to really be a big part of things because I think 2017, I mean, obviously Bradford and Dalvin Cook went down, but defensively they were very lucky all year long. And that's why they were so good. A big part of it was because of how lucky they were with injuries.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let us know in the Daily Norseman comment section or in the YouTube comment section where you think the Vikings stand right now, because I do think it's so interesting that you have that 12-ish range. Generally speaking, you kind of know where your team stands. You may have an idea that they might be a little bit better, but for the most part, and to have that much of a range there from being, a borderline playoff team to a borderline top 5 pick team, just where the roster stands today, it's interesting. So give us a shout. Let us know what you think in the comment section below. One last note. Drew just got engaged this past weekend. So
I did.
Congratulate him on Twitter and offer him your support and advice as he becomes a true adult. Any kind of thoughts here? Floor is yours.
The floor is it's an exciting time. I love my fiance now very much. That's weird to say. That I have a fiance now, but I guess any advice you have, otherwise I'm more excited than anything about this whole thing. So, well,
all right. So I had to put him on the spot there, but that's the end of the show. Thank you as always for listening. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your podcast. Make sure to check out what the rest of the guys at the Climb the Pocket Network
There you go. Doing well.
Are doing with both video and audio. Then also the Daily Norseman as well. That's where you'll find our show. That's where you'll find the best content you can find on the internet about the Vikings. So check that out. Leave us a review. I don't think we've asked for reviews in like 50 episodes. So if you could leave us a review on iTunes, that helps us a little bit. So appreciate that as always. Next week, we will be doing a little bit more of this kind of manufactured content for the off season, unless something drops. So thank you as always for listening, folks. And we will see you guys next week.